Hello, everyone, and welcome to Full Sail Partners Live. Today, we are bringing you another Hear from Your Peers, and we'll focus on shifting your firm's mental perspective on change. I'm Sarah Gonnella. I'm one of the partners at Full Sail Partners, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. We're excited to have special guests from DKS, Nate Schroeder, principal at the company, Kasey DeLucia, principal and director of corporate marketing. We also have joining us our senior CRM consultant, Amanda Roussel. And together we'll dive into DKS's journey of upgrading from Vision to Vantagepoint and how they successfully shifted their firm's they shifted their mental look on things towards embracing change. And so thank you everyone for joining us. So before we dive in, a quick reminder to drop comments into the comments section, any questions you have along the way, any remarks. We're also wanting to make this interactive. So make sure that you are letting us know what questions you might have. And then we also have questions we're going to be asking the audience to prompt you with things to find out about you. So let's get your minds and fingers moving. Let us know in the comments, are you currently using Vision or Vantagepoint? You can simply type in Vision or Vantagepoint. And if it's something else, let us know that too. I also want to know, what do you hope to learn from today's session? So if you can let us know that, we'll also try to make sure that we're capturing that. And so before we really get started, let's just do some quick introductions. So Nate, could we start with you? Could you give a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Sure. Nate Schroeder, and as you said, I'm a principal at DKS, also the office director of our Portland office. Prior to that, I was a group manager as well as a project manager. I've been here 19 years and counting, so I know quite a bit about our project management, project delivery side. I'll hand it to Kasey to do an introduction of herself.
Sure. Kasey DeLucia with DKS Associates. I'm also a principal and the director of corporate marketing. Been here for over 8 years now, and I've been in the AEC industry for over 25. So very familiar with these kinds of upgrades. I think this is my fourth one in my career. So I'm looking forward to talking about lessons learned, and hopefully you all will walk away with some nuggets moving forward in making the upgrade.
Great. Amanda.
Thank you. Amanda Roussel, Senior Consultant with Full Sail Partners, as Sarah shared. I'm one of the consultants that helped with DKS's journey from getting from Vision to Vantagepoint. But I've always been on the last 18 years in the AEC industry and marketing and business development side of things for a variety of firms. And now on the technology side, I help firms like DKS navigate their Deltek Vision or Vantagepoint better and get things up and running there. So we're excited about this conversation with you all today.
Perfect. Well, I'm taking a look at the comments, and we do have a mix of Vision and Vantagepoint people joining us today. And also be sure to add in, what do you hope to learn from today's session? I also did notice that someone was coming in as a LinkedIn user. So just keep in mind that there are settings that you do have to give us permission, StreamYard permission, to be able to see your name. So for some, we may not know who you are. Additionally, one of the other things that we have found is that sometimes when people make comments, if they're making it, we have found through like an Android, through their phone, for whatever reason, sometimes comments don't come in. So just know that we are not ignoring you. So we appreciate you joining us, and we will make sure that we're responding back at the end. But please, continue to add your comments and let us provide us the information as we're asking the questions. So let's now jump in. So Nate, I'd like to start with you, and if you could share a little bit of background on DKS and also what prompted your decision to upgrade from Vision to Vantagepoint.
Sure thing. DKS is a consulting engineering firm in the transportation industry. We're roughly 150 to 155, 160-ish employees in that range, a mid-size. We have offices primarily along the West Coast and in Austin, Texas. And what we prompted us, I guess, to upgrade from Vision to Vantagepoint, at least from my perspective, was we had a lot of different systems in use, for CRM and for accounting, some of our project delivery tools, and they were, separate. And so there was a lot of duplicate effort, to kind of track things and look at things. And we really weren't using a lot of the functionality in Vision anyway to its extent. And that there was a history of folks that were here before my time and early in my career, that were some of the reasoning for that. But we've started to realize that it was inefficient and we wanted to grow. And so with that comes the need to standardize and get things to be a little bit more streamlined, our processes and tools. And this was a way to do that. And I think our CFO had experience with making these changes and was much more comfortable in Vision, and that really started to open our eyes, I think, to the potential that we were missing out on in having things consolidated. And so making this change to Vantagepoint, was a way to do all of that, as well as get into a newer, kind of sleeker looking, easier to use tool. And so I'd say that from my perspective, that was kind of where we were going. Kasey, you might have some insights from the CRM discussions as you guys had, why we made the switch to add.
Sure. Yes. When I started at DKS in 2016, I was tasked with 3 endeavors. And one of those was we need to be able to know what our win rate is. I did a quick synopsis of the different platforms we were using, and it was 9. And it was impossible to determine what an accurate win rate for us was. So the president at the time, I met with him and said, we're using Vision. We don't have a CRM that can talk to the financial side. I would really like to get some seats into Vision from the CRM side. So I think we purchased 10 seats for the marketing team. And then I was able to really be able to more accurately determine what a win rate was because the financial and the CRM side was able to talk. It was my goal for, since 2016 to now, get to one platform from an efficiency standpoint. The more platforms you have, the less efficient your information is going to be. The integrity of your information is going to be compromised because perhaps updated information was put into 2 platforms instead of the 9, and you can't remember which 2 it was put into. So from an efficiency standpoint, from a knowing that the source of information is the truth standpoint, upgrading from then Vision to Vantagepoint is really what made sense, and getting buy-in from our team that this is the platform we are going to use was essential.
Yeah. So Kasey, I'd like to stick with you if I could. So how did your team initially approach the upgrade process, and what did your team do to sort of jumpstart that process?
Sure. Back in 2020, I remember hearing about, Vantagepoint and attending some of Full Sail's webinars. And it was, we're going to be doing this upgrade. At some point, Vision is not going to be supported. So you're going to have to make this change. And so I started attending these webinars. And then our new CFO came on board, and he had extensive experience with Vision. And so it really was understanding that we knew we were going to keep Vision from a financial standpoint. Did it make sense to keep our CRM that was also in Vision, or should we have gone elsewhere? We did look at another platform. We decided ultimately, after going through an extensive comparison between Vision and another platform, that we were going to stick with Vision from the CRM side. And so we formed a group, and it kind of was, there's never a good time to make this upgrade. That's just the reality of it. So it came to a point where our COO called me and said, what do you think about doing a 4-day retreat? And I was like, I think that there's never a good time to do something like this, but we have to do it at some point. So we might as well pull the Band-Aid off. My suggestion to him was, I really would seriously like to get somebody from Full Sail to be in this retreat with us. It turned out that we were able to get both Amanda and Terry from both the CRM and the financial side to attend this 4-day retreat with us. And really, it started out with identifying what our goals were. And I would say identifying what your ultimate goal is. From our standpoint, it was one platform and to be efficient. So with those, goals in mind, we had this 4-day retreat. We knew that we needed to identify potential resistors of the program, which were a lot. And it was a lot because people weren't given access to use Vision before. We opened it up to all DKS. We have seats for everybody now, and training was essential, but we knew we had to take those resistors and turn them into adopters. And that's where the training came in. So this 4-day retreat really did help us identify what are the goals of this program that we all have. What information do we want to see? How much do we want to customize? And what do we want to be able to track? What sort of metrics do we want to see?
Okay, great. All right, so welcome back, Nate. And so wanted to see if you had anything further you might want to add to what Kasey was saying. And then just what were some of the biggest challenges you faced during the upgrade and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was switching over to a network connection, but I don't have anything to add to what Kasey said. I think she touched on most of the key elements there of the retreat that we did. But some of the biggest challenges, Kasey already talked about, is the people that were resistors, right, and people that felt like it was going to be more work or different things, things that ideally we should have been doing all along but hadn't been. And so that was tough to overcome. The other challenge I think that we faced was, I think it goes back to what Kasey was saying, is how do we get all these different systems into one, right? And how do we accommodate the needs of all of those different groups? Because we had developed them for a reason and we were using them. And so making sure that we were trying to accommodate and take what we absolutely needed from each of the tools that we had been using and make sure it was accounted for or addressed in some way. Sometimes we weren't able to accommodate it and we had to make that decision and move on with the understanding that overall there was going to be a benefit and we may lose some specific functionality of some of those tools. And we heard a lot about that over the time that we've implemented and since, but it was really keeping that big picture in mind as to why we were doing the upgrade in the first place.
I think that's one of the key points that a lot of times people try to focus on is the bigger idea of what it is that's needed from a company perspective. How do you guys balance that with the individual need as well? What are some of the things you felt were successful and how it is that you were able to communicate that and get people to understand sort of what it was in it for them?
Kasey, I don't know if you want to take that. I have some thoughts. I think some of the group that we had involved in implementing Vantagepoint, I think had a lot to do with how we addressed that. We had representation from marketing with Kasey. We had our CFO, our COO, and I was there, kind of representing the project management, side of things. And we had another senior project manager also involved in marketing. And so we had a really good mix of people, as well as, our admin, our director of administration, so we had a lot of different perspectives representing those different needs in the discussions and in the implementation. And we're able to speak on behalf, kind of each of those groups. And I think that was a way that we were able to balance that, here's what my group is looking for, but then also hearing at the same time what other groups were looking for, what they needed, and being able to, identify what is the most important and compromise, on the things that we couldn't always get.
Yeah. And so Amanda, you went on site with this group. And I know you also went with, I believe it was Terry, another individual as well on the finance side of the house. And so things to add to that and just maybe focusing on, what were some of the things, with your experience working with firms that made you feel like this was going to be a successful upgrade? Because I remember you coming to us and going, oh wow, this one, is really exciting because of they were having sort of some issues with launching, previously, and then it was like, okay, now we're really getting serious, and you saw that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so I know DKS had communication for a while before, and it would be like, okay, we're ready to get started. Maybe we need to pump the brakes a little bit. There was a little back and forth. And then finally it was, I think, this big realization, like Nate was saying, they went bigger than just the Vision to Vantagepoint upgrade, right? And like Kasey saying, there were so many separate systems. So it was so much more of a bigger picture idea. And I think that also included C-suite members of the firms, principals, associates at the firm, all the way down to some of the people who are doing the work every day, whether in Deltec or not, but it really affects everybody across the board. So starting with that higher level view of, okay, we want to grow. Okay, how do we grow? We do these steps. Ultimately figuring out, okay, this Vision to Vantagepoint upgrade is a prime opportunity to rethink and improve processes and streamline efforts along the way. Not only would it make their lives easier, but also onboarding in the future, having those processes set is invaluable. So it was really the commitment. Another thing would be, so their CFO, Mike, had called one afternoon. He's like, hey, we have an idea internally. What if we did an on-site retreat? We have to get out of our offices because time, it's never a good time, like Kasey said, never a good time, but we need time to focus. So it needs to be a few days where we get together, we hash all this out at a separate location. And when we walk out of there, we already have a list of things that we want to make sure have been identified. And the team knew there would be work to do after those 4 days, but that was such an awesome jump start to the whole process. Everyone knew expectations. Nate talked about the group they had around the table. DKS did a phenomenal job of getting the right people in that room. All groups were represented, and really they had trust from the top. So before we even all met up, that group knew that they had blessings from the president to make the decisions that needed to be made. They would not be questioned when they got back to the office. So really that commitment from the top, giving them the capacity to take that on for a few days off-site, and the collaboration that group brought together was huge. So many positive things, and we knew that was going to be a success.
Great. So you talked about buy-in from the top. So Kasey or Nate, either one, what does buy-in from the top actually look like? Because people talk about it, but what does it actually mean?
Well, I can take that, and Nate, you can add on to this. When we decided to do this, communication happened with the entire firm. We have a monthly webinar, and then there were also emails and reminders that we are going to be making this change. It will affect everyone. It will slow us down before it speeds us up, but with the bigger picture in mind, it will be a more efficient system, and it will be one platform. The president is the one that communicated that message, and it started from the top down. And so with our Vantagepoint team, we created, a portion on our intranet that was Vantagepoint centric, where people could go in and find out, if I have a CRM question, who am I going to contact? And that would be me. If I have a project management question, who am I going to contact? It started with our president, the communication, and you have to have that buy-in at the top. And the president supported this group and what we were doing. We made sure that during executive webinars, Vantagepoint was always a topic. We had lunch and learns. We provided training, which we still provide training. I I personally do individual training for people that are like, I don't know how to do this. I'm still intimidated by the system. I have no problem doing that, but just making sure that, the training is happening, the communication is happening. There's change management that had to occur, and it was a big change for our firm. But people understanding that this will be more efficient. There is a big picture in mind. You can't just look at it from a myopic standpoint in that, but what about my favorite platform I was using before? Yes, we understand you really like that platform, but this is the direction we're going, and we have the support of the president in order to do that.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull up a comment that came from our audience. And this person, when we had asked what they wanted to gain from today's session, they said, we're constantly in a state of change management, so hoping to learn new strategies. And I want to sort of emphasize a couple of things that you just said, Kasey, is that, one, Amanda started off with, buy-in from the top, so that in itself, you also hit upon the fact of messaging. Like, messaging is a marketing activity in a lot of ways. So I think executives and principals utilizing marketing to help them to understand the things that you can do to really make sure you're communicating with your staff and they're all on the same page of the objectives that you guys had mentioned, to understanding like why, not just the how, but the why of things. And the other thing that I think was super important that I want to really emphasize is you said we slowed down so we could speed up. I think that is critical when anybody is doing any type of change. A lot of times we're going, but sometimes we need to slow down, and sometimes that means potentially impacting productivity, or it means hitting, it impacting the bottom line. But if you don't take that time to slow down and you're still in that fast speed, you're not really thinking through things. So I just want to sort of emphasize that I hope that people heard what it is that you were saying there and the importance of those items. So I just wanted to call them out. And so I also want to just know from the audience, for those that are watching, what has been your biggest challenge that you faced with system upgrades? Share it in one word or an emoji. Maybe it's the poop icon, or, and so let us know what the biggest challenge you faced, with your system upgrades. And then there was a question that came in here. So I think it's Wendy Smith, but it's coming across as LinkedIn user. How much time was spent by marketing accounting to work on firms cleanup, and how did that process go?
Well, I work very closely with our CFO, and so and I'm going to be completely honest, we're still doing cleanup. It doesn't happen in one batch by any means, but he and I were speaking, and I'm like, we have a serious issue with our firms here in Vision, and we've got duplicate, triplicate firms. So Mike exported a list of like 3,000 firms, and I went through this list and I meticulously deleted the duplicates, the triplicates, and then we had an ODOT issue where there's a lot of different regions with Oregon Department of Transportation. And so how are we going to categorize this? But it does involve, really manually looking and making sure that I'm going to just talk about firms and contacts right now, that those are in a state of integrity that you want them to be in. We still have issues with contacts right now we're trying to resolve, but it does take some time. And this is where, you are slowing down before you speed up. But once you get that information good and you have a good client list, that's a huge effort that, I was happy that we went through. But there was a point where I was looking at a 3,000 firm list and really going through their line by line to make sure this is what we want to keep, this is what we want to delete.
And I would add to that, to everything that Kasey said, on top of that, we identified ways to use, we had some temp, employees on some of those tasks that are just that, kind of repetitive and time intensive, things that help free up our time, still a money investment. And I don't know exactly how much that was, but, looking through this whole process, we tried to find opportunities to outsource, right, some of those tasks to help, kind of spread the load of those things that were, real time intensive.
Yeah.
And
So go ahead. Yeah.
I'd like to add, this is something a lot of clients experience, right? Your firm's hub and your contacts hub are moving targets. You want to get it as good as you can over time, but the moment you get it 100% clean, someone's going to move companies, or one company is going to acquire another. It's just the nature of things, and that's okay. But to do these updates in one space is where that source of truth piece comes in, and you're not comparing lists from multiple sources. It can go a little faster, not to say it's fast. Okay. A lot of that depends on your capacity. I did see the comment that like the human brain is the most powerful computer. Vantagepoint can do a lot of things, guys. It cannot read minds. So you do have to tell it which contact is the keeper or which firm is the keeper. So give yourself some grace and know that it's a journey.
So I'd be curious, who actually has ever got their firm and contact info centers or hubs to 100%? Like, I don't think that ever happens, because everyone is moving in the industry. So definitely what Amanda said, give yourself grace, have mechanisms in place that will allow you to be able to know when it is you need to be updating things as well. And so some of the other comments that came in when we asked the biggest challenges in like one word or an emoji, someone said people. Like, if we didn't have to deal with people. No, but that could also be your biggest asset as well. And I think that's what we're seeing today with DKS, is that by getting everyone together and on the same page and really hearing each other out, that's really the first step to working with each other. And then Lisa added, in her past life, lack of leadership. And so we heard that here as well. So thank you for those comments. Keep them coming. And so I want to continue on. So Nate, how did you ensure that project managers and group managers and the BD managers were actively involved in the change process? And what was their feedback as you were going along?
Yeah, we really tried to approach that in several different ways. Like Kasey mentioned, when we came back, we had all these great ideas. And at times it was hard to remember that we had spent 4 days in this, system, playing with it, looking, and we were comfortable and familiar with things, and we had to kind of take a step back. So we did a little bit of training, right, for different things, and show and tell before we really made the switch, so people could get experience with it and just see it. We were able to use a sandbox, right? We had the sandbox database, right? So we let people actually at some point play with it and get in there and mess around with it, when they weren't going to screw anything up, to get a sense. And then we also used, when we were creating dashboards, in there, we would use little small groups, I would take a group of like PMs or others and say, what do you want to see on this? What information would be useful? How, if you could have this be anything that you wanted to be, what would it be? And we were able to get that input. We couldn't accommodate everything. And sometimes people just didn't know what they didn't know, which is why it's kind of been an ongoing, still an ongoing process, and it's ever evolving and changing, which I think is important to keep in mind in all of this. But, the feedback initially was, okay, I'm kind of open to it. Still questioning whether or not it's going to be more work, whether or not it's going to have the same functionality. And that's where that, we're talking about earlier, like consistency and just that support of, yep, we know, and we're going to get there, and it's going to be okay. And then that feedback, and realize, that some of the stuff, it really wasn't taking longer, right? And that was part of our messaging too, was being able to explain to people, right now you're doing this, and now you're going to be doing this. And even though it's like it'll be roughly the same amount of effort for you, it'll save 3 other people from doing stuff down the road because we're just putting it straight into the system, or we're updating it directly, or you're getting your own report, whatever it is. And that, I think, really helped people, kind of start to see, like, we weren't full of crap, right? We were telling the truth, and that, it was beneficial, and that it really, for a lot of people, they didn't even really notice a change other than the interface was a little bit nicer looking.
Yeah. And so it sounds like things as far as like connecting the dots so people can see how it is impacting other people. So it's not just their bubble of how it's just impacting them. So getting a little bit more of a bigger picture can also help in those things. So that means providing communication, providing, of course, ongoing training. I think that's one of the things that I have found is that a lot of times people think, oh, we're done. Like we launched it. So like, no, there's still things, that this is a living, breathing database that people are changing and projects are constantly changing. So we've got to continue to train on new things that are coming. We've got to continue to do QA, QC type things to understand things within the system. And so we've heard, in the past that managing a new process or a project on top of what you're doing can be difficult because you have a job to do on top of doing this. So what tips do you guys have for our audience on how you can handle that challenge?
Well, it comes back to some of the stuff that we've already talked about is, the acknowledgement that it's an ongoing thing, and providing support, right? And I think when our team, we've talked a lot about the team and the group that was involved with this. All of us acknowledged that this was not going to be something, like you said, when we came back, we weren't done, right? And I think we were very clear about that, even at the on-site retreat, talking about that, and we fully were aware, and we were all made ourselves available, right, to help answer questions, help be available to kind of share the load and the burden of people. And having their questions answered. We've created tools. We would do webinars, right, to introduce new tools or refresh on old tools. We had we opened up a suggestion box, right? One of the other things I thought was really cool about our group and the way we went through this was we came with a fully transparent, said we don't know that this is exactly how it's going to be, right? And then we got everything right. It's not perfect, and it's a huge change. There's a lot to to dig into, and so having people have that ability to provide input as they were using it was really helpful, as well as that ongoing messaging of, if we continue to do this, it's going to get better, right? We talked about it earlier, the go slow to go faster, kind of mindset. And that really is what I think has happened, since we implemented it. It was really slow, and people were, and we still have to refresh on certain things. But I think, since then, we're starting to see people doing it, but then asking like, well, hey, how can I get this report? Well, you can get that report by putting all this stuff and doing all the things that we've been talking about. This will, it's going to give you more information. It's going to make your life easier on top of what you're already doing, because we consolidated systems. You don't have to go ask this person for this information. You can get it directly. So just kind of trying to keep that messaging of, yeah, you're doing it on top of but some of it is your job, right? Especially as project managers. It's like, yeah, your job is to manage the project. So get in there and look at that things and do those things. That's okay. It's not on top of it. It's in addition to, and it helps, right? And it's providing them, access to information and things in a more real-time way than we had before. And I think that helps that, that buy-in and people to continue to want to invest the time to learn new things and see what more we can get out of it, which I think has been great.
Yeah. So Amanda, we've been talking about shift of mindset. And so how can firms shift their focus from viewing Vantagepoint as just an accounting tool to a comprehensive firm management solution?
Ooh, this is, I encounter this one with clients quite often. Okay. So I come in on the CRM implementation side of things, or optimizing how it is in their database. And it is kind of the great divide here, where finance uses certain components of it and marketing wants to use certain components, but they're really not speaking the same language. So communication really becomes a key factor here. in realizing that you're after a lot of the same data that can reside in the database. We just have to find that bridge of communication to where everyone can get what they need out of it more independently. To Nate's point, like, go run your report. You shouldn't have to go to the report king or queen to get the data you want out of the system. We want to empower users to master search functionality and understand how to run a report and get the information that they need and understand what it is they're looking at. But when we have that open communication, that's hearing from your people about what they want to see, and finance and marketing and PMs collaborating together, that's the core group there. But also when we think about what your staff, a majority of your staff, might do in the database. I encounter a lot of firms who only gave them timesheets and expense reports. There's nothing wrong with that. But imagine what they could do if they had the power to see and learn what else they could get out of the database. And really, I find a lot of third-party solutions come into play from those individuals who only have access to timesheets and expense reports. They have no clue what they're missing out on. It's not their fault. No one showed them. No one gave them access, but they're like, hey, I need a better way to manage this. And then they go off to another solution when really we could educate each other and groups to get more out of the database. It's very much a shared resource. I say that all the time. It is a shared company resource, historically mostly managed by finance teams, but I love that it's taking a broader approach now and pulling in multiple roles within firms.
Yeah, and when you think about the fact that Vantagepoint is a project-based ERP, the projects is the center of the database versus the account or the firm. So it is an understanding that we are a project-based industry. Like everything that surrounds us is projects is in the middle, and all the things that surround that are the firms, the contacts, the activities, all the proposals, resource management. So it is a different way. People that come from outside of the industry have to do a little bit of a mind shift in understanding that as well. And so we're going to be taking some further questions from the audience. So go ahead and get those questions in. We're going to be, starting to wrap things up. So I want to make sure that people are able to get their questions in. And I did get one already. So how are your power users involved in the ongoing transition? And are there individuals helping other users informally?
Yes, I'm one of those people. I just sat in on our Seattle BD call and was like, have you guys paid attention to your dashboard KPIs? Are you looking to see what your pipeline's at? And I got these blank stares. And do you know who your A-tier clients are? Because I created a list for each office on who their A-tier clients were. This is how you use this list. This is where this list resides. It's already set up for you. And I received other questions like, well, I haven't really been in the system to look at it that much. And I'm like, I would be more than happy to provide you or the office with another tutorial on how to use the system. I want to make sure to make it clear. There are no seamless database upgrades. You're going to have challenges. There is no database that is ever done, and you are never going to make everybody happy. It's a great goal to strive for all three of those things, but I really want people to be realistic. So for me, I said, this is purely selfish on my end. I'd be more than happy to do this training for you because I want you all to use this program, feel comfortable navigating in it so that you can get the information you want out of it in order to hit your KPIs. So I personally do that. I know Mike Thomas has done that. I'm sure Nate has showed other PMs. You have those power users identified on our intranet based on if it's CRM, if it's accounting, if it's project manager. They know who the power users are and how to get a hold of them in order to ask these questions.
Yeah, and I would add, same sort of situation on the project delivery side, as incorporating it into our meetings and asking those questions when we're having discussions like, well, hey, we can get this information out of, just chiming in with that, right? Hey, we can get this information. Do you know how? And we've had several, meetings, times where we've taken a chunk out of the time to just refresh, right? This is how you do it. So to answer the initial question, yes, the power users are continuing to stay involved and be available and answer questions, as well as a number of other resources. But yeah, that's a big part of it, I think, is having people that others know they can go to and get their questions answered.
Yeah, so I have a reformed accountant. And so she said, 100%. I was one of them for a long time who didn't want anyone touching my accounting system, but they aren't just accounting systems anymore. So that's awesome, Julie. We got you on our side of seeing that it really is about the entire company, and it really does benefit everyone. And the accounting group, when we help train them and when we get other people, and it's not just the burden on just the accounting group, that we're really embracing getting everyone involved, because it's really should be the company's database, and being able to see information related to the clients and the projects that we're all trying to service. So I love that shift in perspective. Did you have something there you wanted to add, Nate?
I did. I think we encountered some of that as well, and not even just from accounting, but from some of our project coordinators and others that are in the database all the time and working. And so we addressed that during through our implementation by having workflows, right? So there's a back check, right? So yeah, the PMs. I think somebody mentioned this earlier, right? You have a bunch of people putting stuff in there. It's everybody, even though we tell people this is how you name a project, this is how you do this, it's like, yeah, it's all over the place. But we've added in some some workflows and notifications that go to certain individuals that then check that, right? So it comes back to a smaller, there's QA/QC process that happens, and that's helping. It's not perfect, right? But it addresses a lot of that concern of that standardization by having we want to make it as easy for people to get in and add the information or do what they need to do. But we all want to lose the ability to have a consistent and standardized database. So we've used the workflows and notifications in there to get those people involved and have it address some of that.
And tagging on to what Nate just said, DKS on our intranet has quick reference sheets, and I think we're up to like number 27 right now. And each of these reference sheets, it is a tutorial on how to open a project in Vantagepoint, how to put an activity in Vantagepoint, how to complete your time card in Vantagepoint, how to complete your expense report in Vantagepoint. Monday I just did, again, I got the question of, well, it would be great if we could have some sheets on how to do this. I brought up our intranet. I went over all the quick reference sheets and I go, oh, do you mean this? Oh, yes, we forgot that was there. Constant reminders is what is needed.
I love that. So really, when we think about embracing and cultivating a culture of change within your company, things that I've heard is meeting often as different groups on things, having reference materials that people can refer back to. You mentioned also the intranet. Nate, you mentioned earlier the suggestion box and the feedback from people, lunch and learns. What are other things that you guys think are important to cultivating a culture of embracing change?
We still do have bi-weekly meetings with the Vantagepoint group. So we are going over, in addition to all of the things that you just mentioned, Sarah, we also have an email that goes out to all DKS. And the most recent one was, hey, you might notice that the visualization of the hubs changed. Well, that's because we upgraded to the 7.0 version of Vantagepoint. So not only do we have all of those materials on the intranet and our lunch and learns, but we also do have continued weekly or bi-weekly meetings with the Vantagepoint group. And we do also source emails on any changes that anyone might see, how to, star a favorite, things like that. So it is constant communication, and we continue to meet to talk about new ways to do things, maybe some of the architecture enhancements that we might want to make. This is an evolutionary process. Again, your database is never done, and you're going to think, okay, we've launched it, we're good. You're going to get in there and you're going to find that, gosh, we need an on-call box. We need to know how many on-call contracts we have, and we need to create a box to check it so we can search for what recent on-calls have we won, or what are our on-calls and when is the expiration date. So we continue to enhance the architecture of our system as well.
So who is actually the ownership? Who has ownership of that? Of, hey, there's a new version that came out, and hey, here's some new quick reference sheets that we're providing you. What does that group look like? Who owns that?
So as far as like upgrades are concerned, I'm part of a national Vantagepoint users group where we meet monthly. And so anything I learn, I feed to our CFO. And that's Mike Thomas. So I'll say, 7.0 is coming. Here are the enhancements that are going to be made. Here's what's going to affect us. When it comes to the quick reference sheets, that really comes from our Vantagepoint group meeting at that biweekly basis, just saying, hey, we've had some new employees. Maybe we need to focus on onboarding, or maybe we need to focus on creating a quick reference sheet on really the go-to on how to complete your timesheet. Or maybe we need to create something on how to put an activity into Vantagepoint. It really is, what are we hearing from our fellow employee owners on what's going to help them navigate the system the best? And that kind of prompts what's the next quick reference sheet we should create that would help everybody. And Nate, you can add on to that.
No, I think you hit on it. I mean, the ultimate ownership kind of depends on which aspect of it. Casey and Mike have probably the lion's share of it, but I think the Vantagepoint committee that we still have together, does still make a lot of those decisions as a group, and we don't meet as frequently as we used to. But like Casey said, it's bi-weekly. Sometimes they get canceled, which is but again, it's just that kind of ongoing commitment and recognizing that it's not done. Right. And I think you were asked a question about how do you cultivate that culture of embracing change. I think a big part of it is just, for something like this is acknowledging like it's not done. Right. And I'm not comparing Vantagepoint to Disneyland, but it strikes me when like Walt Disney always said, like, as long as there's imagination in the world, Disneyland will never be complete. Right. Or never be done. And for me as a Disney person, that always stands out to me. Right. That it's like, these things they're living, they're ongoing, it's not done. And that can be terrifying, but it can also be really exciting for people to realize that it's not set in stone, right? If we don't like something or we want to do something different, we're okay with that. And everybody on the committee and the president, it embraces that idea and knows that, the suggestions come from all over the place, and we can talk about it. And if we don't implement it, we have good discussions about why. Or we may say, that's great. We didn't even think about that. That makes your life easier. We're going to look at ways that we can include that. And I think that really helps, kind of with this embracing the change.
Amanda, do you have further thoughts on things that you have done regarding cultivating change as people are approaching things like this?
In support of what Casey and Nate have shared, you have to market it to your firm. It's an ongoing marketing effort. Treat it as a project that you need to keep your stakeholders engaged in and very educated on. Nate kind of comparing it to Disneyland. We did work really hard, but then we did go play in Disneyland one evening. And Nate's a phenomenal tour guide. I will add that. But really, okay, so they're talking about these bi-weekly meetings. This isn't because they went to Vantagepoint a couple months ago. Like, they're well over a year over that Vantagepoint hump. So there's no end date, I'm sure, to those recurring meetings because it's never done. So it's really acknowledging that and working together as a team, which they've been a great example of that. And we have a lot of clients that are. It's wonderful to see. And then we have some where it's like, okay, this team they've never collaborated and communicated that much before. So it does, on the consulting side, we take a different approach sometimes to those conversations because we need to bring everybody together working toward the same goal. But really cultivating change is acknowledging it's an ongoing effort, education and marketing that.
Yeah, and if I could also add, the other thing that I think is important that I saw within your group from the conversations that Amanda had, as well as just the conversations we've had today and previously, is that when you message things and say you're going to have issues and that, oh, I'm so concerned or I'm all worried or all of these things in sort of a negative tone to people, they're going to have that. What I saw from your group is that you guys were like, all right, what are we going to do? Like, let's look at how we can embrace this and how it is we can use this to our advantage. So that communication, when I find that people are successful, it's because the group is collectively saying, we're going to look at our objectives and how it is we're going to accomplish it. And you're striving for the positive versus anticipating all the negative that comes from things. And I think that mind shift is also important. That I don't know if you guys recognize that that's what you did, but that is, a huge part of it as well. And so,
for sure.
Yeah, so we do have some other things that have come in. So a LinkedIn user said, it sounds great to have everyone use the program. However, security and roles are a struggle. How many roles do you guys have?
I wish I could answer that question. Mike Thomas has the security key. We do have various different roles, though. So I know I have a different role than the rest of the marketing team does. The project managers, depending on their levels, have different roles. The CFO holds the ultimate key. We have various different roles here at DKS, and I wish I could give you a number, but I can't.
So yeah, we could probably follow up with an answer, I'm sure. But back to what somebody else mentioned earlier about, I think it was Amanda, having people have access to everything and other things. I think with the switch to Vantagepoint, we did some of that, right? I think we consolidated some of our roles and expanded some of them and got rid of this. Like, well, you can see that report or you can see those things. There's no, it's not hidden from people. So that I think that probably helped a little bit. But like Kasey said, we do still have several, but we could probably get you a better answer than that.
And maybe Amanda, you can address, some of the things regarding roles and what you've seen to be successful, because I know that a lot of times when you start, people have a lot of roles and you're really guiding them to rethink about things.
Yeah, Vision to Vantagepoint is definitely an opportunity to take the less is more approach when it comes to security roles. They are roles for a reason. We're not giving security rights to individual employees. You have them in a role, but it is really thinking about, okay, this specific group of people need the ability to modify these things or only see these things. So it's really taking a role by role approach and going in and determining what is going to be the most effective thing for a specific group of people. And every firm has a unicorn, maybe even a team of unicorns, and they just need to see. Nate, I'll pick on you. You were a PM when we first started this project, and you had different access than some of the people than other PMs, right? Because you did things a little differently, and you were really a champion in the database. So it was putting those like people together. So it's being very mindful of what people need to have access to.
And I think the change on the dashboards has helped as well, so that you can also add an individual versus just, everything, one dashboard goes to a group. So that has helped, I think, a lot. And so I do have another question that came from Frank. He said, how many staff and outside support helped build Vantagepoint to where PMs, marketing, and accounting were functional? So what did that overall group look like?
Is that meeting like outside consultants?
Yeah, maybe start internally and then we can talk outside.
So I think we had Nate, 6 on our team internally with Vantagepoint on the team. And then as far as outside, we originally started with Amanda and Terry, and then we have enlisted the help of Full Sail to do additional things within Vantagepoint. Like right now, I'm working to get our CX survey out of Vantagepoint, and so there's other things that are coming up with the program that we want to continue enhancing. But if it was outside consultants, it was primarily just full sale. And then we did have a marketing assistant really dig in and help with those contacts and putting the write-ups into Vantagepoint as well. So a lot of it was internal, a little bit obviously external, and getting full sales assistance.
Okay, great. We'll continue to bring those questions in. We're going to be wrapping things up. And first, I just wanted to thank Nate and Kasey and Amanda for sharing your insights and experience today. And we've really covered a lot of ground about overcoming challenges to engaging managers and fostering a culture of change. And I just want to wrap things up and ask each of you for a final piece of advice for other firms considering, a similar upgrade. So my last question is to better understand from you, what is one piece of final advice that you would give to people? And then for the audience, I would love to also hear what is one takeaway from today's event. And so let's start with Kasey.
Identify your goals.
I love it. Simple and very important. If you don't do that, then you don't know where you're heading. And so, Nate, what's your final advice?
I think, like Kasey said, goals is good, but I think acknowledging being honest and acknowledging the level of effort that's going to be needed to undertake a change, right? And making a commitment to invest that, especially with a change as significant as this. I think if you try to half-ass it, or you don't put enough energy or support behind it, it won't be successful. I think that was part of why this worked, is we acknowledged from the beginning, it's a big deal. We're going to treat it as such. And that really helped out.
I like that. Amanda, final thoughts from you.
Embrace the journey. It doesn't have to be scary. There might be a few unknowns, but embrace the journey, because when it's done right, great things come of it.
That's awesome. Well, one of our audience members, just to sort of wrap things up, one of their takeaways is that their marketing manager should have attended this. So luckily this is recorded and they can view it after the fact. So be sure to share the link on LinkedIn or YouTube with others that you think you want to help cultivate a culture of embracing change, and how it is that DKS ended up having a successful upgrade from Vision to Vantagepoint and lessons learned from them. And so I just want to give a final thank you to everyone for their interaction, and a thanks for Amanda and Nate and Kasey for joining us and their valuable insight. This has really been a fantastic session. And thank you everyone for joining us. And remember, embracing change is challenging, but staying stagnant is even harder. So let's all take these lessons and apply them to our own firm. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.